Never thought a simple text could make my hands tremble like that. Ma'am, Claire says it's better if we keep it just family this time. Hope you understand. That's what my son wrote. The same son I once bathed, nursed, and sat up with all night when he had chickenpox. The same man I gave part of my pension to, so he and his wife could buy their home now. I wasn't family anymore. I was a burden, and burdens don't get invited. Hey, say you become invisible as you age? I don't think that's true. You don't disappear. You're erased. With every casual sigh, every decision made without you. Every time you're spoken about in the third person while you're in the room, that's not vanishing. That's being slowly sanded down until all that's left is the echo of someone useful. I know this because it happened to me, and for a long time, I let it. I'm Margaret Whitmore. People call me Maggie, though hardly anyone says my name anymore. Daniel and Claire had just moved into their first real home when they invited me to come live with them. I'd sold my little cottage in Dorset quiet, sea breeze through the windows. My garden full of thyme and lavender and moved into their spare room. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until we get settled, ma'am, Daniel said. You'll be helping us loads with Emily, and once things are stable, we'll sort something more permanent. So I gave them £40,000, a third of my pension savings, to help with the down payment. I didn't ask for anything in writing. I trusted my son, because that's what mothers do. We help, we show up, we believe the best of them because we raised them at first. It worked. I did the nursery runs, folded endless piles of baby grows, learned how to make oat milk lattes the way Claire liked them, and never not once interfered. But things shifted as they do. Quietly, I became part of the wallpaper. Emily's school has a parents-only meeting. Claire's mother's coming over, so it might be a bit full this weekend. We're just doing a couple's trip next time. Yeah. And then, last Saturday, that text, Mom, Claire says it's better if we keep it just family this time. Hope you understand. I stared at my phone for nearly an hour. The words didn't change. The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't tell them I'd seen the estate agent brochure Claire left on the dining table earlier that week. Luxury, independent, living, peaceful, and private. With sticky notes on pages about cost breakdowns and brochures marked Stage 1, family conversation. Apparently, the conversation hadn't happened yet, but the planning had, and I was the project that night. I made a pot of tea and sat outside on the little bench in the garden, my garden. I'd planted the clematis with Emily last spring. She had dirt on her nose, and I remember thinking, and I was watching them alone. I don't know when the grief turned into clarity. Maybe it was while I sat in my room, hearing them laugh downstairs like I didn't exist, or maybe it was when I logged into the joint account Daniel had helped me set up 3 years ago and noticed that 2 recurring payments, £250 and £400, had been quietly withdrawn for the last 8 months. I knew I hadn't authorized them. Claire handled most of the household budgeting, Daniel had said. They were always tight on funds, but I had asked for nothing, not even rent, and still, they took more the next day. I called my oldest friend Judith. She and I taught primary school together 30 years ago. Now, she ran a community center and a free legal clinic once a week. I've got no concrete proof yet, I told her, but something's off. Judith didn't even hesitate. It's time to put yourself first, quietly, smartly. I asked if she thought it was too late. No, she said, but if you don't act now, it soon will be. That evening, I opened the drawer beneath my bed and pulled out my old file box. Birth certificate, pension records, bank statements, the transfer receipt from the cottage sale, the check made out to Daniel, scanned and dated. I still had a copy and a printed email thread from 2019 where Daniel had thanked me for the generous help with the house. No signed agreement, but enough BREADCRUMBS. It was enough to begin. Over the next week, I opened a new bank account in my name only. I started discreetly documenting things, conversations, texts, withdrawals, account numbers. I found a solicitor. Through Judith's clinica, woman named Eleanor, without judgment. Then she said the words I had been afraid to admit I needed to hear. Margaret, you're not helpless. You've been generous, but it's time to protect yourself. She drafted a notice of intent that would legally block any move to transfer the house without my consent. And she gave me a look as she handed me the paperwork. You don't owe them an explanation. You owe yourself peace. That night, Claire knocked on my door for the first time in days. She smiled too tightly. Bit of an odd question. Do you still have the login to the shared savings account? I paused. Oh, I said. I moved my money into my private account. Just keeping things simple, you know. Her smile flickered. Oh, she said. Right. For the first time, I saw something other than dismissal in her eyes. Fear. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I simply started showing up differently. I started saying, no, thank you. More often, I stopped explaining myself. I took longer walks. I cooked just for myself. I stopped offering to watch Emily every weekend. Daniel noticed first. You. All right, ma'am. You've been quiet. I've just been thinking, I replied, stirring my tea. It's important to think before things get taken from you, don't you think? He didn't respond in the quiet. I felt something strange. Power, not the kind you demand, the kind you finally remember. You've had all along. It's funny what you begin to see once you stop making excuses for people. Once I made the decision to protect myself, freely protect myself, it was like someone turned the lights on in a room I'd been sitting in for years. Suddenly, everything looked different. Claire's polite smiles had edges to them now. Daniel's distracted affection felt rehearsed. Even the house, the home I helped them build, felt like a performance I was no longer welcome to attend. But I didn't rage. I watched. I listened. And I planned the solicitor, Eleanor. If any funds were taken without permission, or under pretense, you can pursue recovery. Or more. More. That word lingered with me. That same week, I received a call from the retirement housing coordinator. Claire had listed me as the prospective resident for an assisted living flat. Without my knowledge, without my consent, she'd even listed my pension income and savings on the application. I stood in the kitchen that evening, watching her pour a glass of white wine while Daniel scrolled on his phone. I got a call about the Rosefield Flats. Application, I said casually. Claire froze for a moment, then turned. Oh, I meant to mention that. It was just an initial inquiry. They need those forms to show availability. Nothing's decided. She smiled like it was no big deal. No big deal that she was trying to relocate me like an old table. She no longer needed, of course, I said, sipping my tea. But just so you're aware, I've spoken to a solicitor. The silence that followed, delicious. Daniel looked up. You've spoken to a solicitor? Yes, I said calmly, just making sure everything's in order. I think it's wise, don't you? Claire's glass clinked a little too loudly. Against the counter, I left the room before they could respond. Let them sit in it a few days later. I took Emily out for ice cream after school, just the two of us. We sat in the park, her legs swinging beneath the bench as she licked strawberry. Off her fingers, Gran, she said suddenly. Why do Mummy and Daddy whisper when you leave the room? I blinked. Do they? She nodded. They say it's time for you to go to a special place where old people live. But I don't want you to go. My throat tightened. I smiled, brushing her hair back. I'm not going anywhere just yet. My darling. Some places we don't get sent. We choose whether or not to go. She beamed at that, not quite understanding but trusting me completely. That trust. I would not let them shatter it. Over the next few weeks, I continued preparing quietly. I separated the last of my savings, removed my name from their utility accounts, changed the PIN on my phone, spoke to Judith about arranging a small rental flat, just in case. The funny thing is, the more I acted, it's clarity, and it's one of the most loving things you can give yourself. Then, one morning it happened. Claire was in the lounge, laptop open, papers strewn across the table. I passed through to make my tea when I caught a glimpse of the document she was reading. Property transfer and early sale clause. Whitmore residence. She was reviewing how to transfer or sell the home. I set my mug down, planning something. I asked lightly. Claire jumped. Oh no, just tax stuff, it's nothing. Because if it involves this house, I said, walking closer, you might want to be careful. You see, I've filed a legal notice with the land registry. Any attempt to sell without notifying me is now legally blocked. She paled. I also have proof of financial transfers from our joint account without my consent, I continued. The solicitor said if we want to handle this privately, we should. Because once it goes to court, it becomes public. She said nothing. I took my tea and left the room. That night, Daniel came to my room. He stood at the doorway like a boy again. Not a husband, not a father, not a man with power. Just a son. Mom. I didn't know she was doing all of this. I looked at him. No, Daniel, you just didn't care enough to ask. He swallowed. What are you going to do? I'm going to take care of myself, I said, the same way I've always taken care of everyone else. He nodded slowly. Then, to my surprise, he said, I deserve this, don't I? And for once, I let him sit in the silence. Yes, Daniel, you do. A week later, I moved into a small cottage just 2 streets away from Judith. Nothing fancy. But mine? I left quietly, with no drama, no tears. I took my books, my plants, my photographs of Emily, mostly. I left behind my guilt, my hesitation, and the last of my illusions. And for the first time in a long time, I sat by the window with my tea and smiled, not politely, But freely, because I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore, I saw myself. When I turned the key in the lock of the little rented cottage, it felt like I was breathing properly for the first time in years, not shallow. Polite breaths through tight smiles, but real ones. Full and steady, it wasn't fancy, just a single-floor home tucked behind hedges, with uneven brickwork and a garden overrun by wild rosemary and weeds. The boiler made strange clunking sounds at night. The hallway light flickered, but it was mine, not in name, but in spirit. No one here would whisper about me in the next room. No one would manage me. I slept the entire first night without waking up once. The next morning, I made tea and walked barefoot across the chilly kitchen tiles, windows open to let the April air roll through. I looked at the clutter of mismatched mugs on the drying rack and smiled. There was no curated perfection here. No decor curated for Instagram, just mugs. Just me. A week after I moved out, Claire sent a message. "We're worried about how sudden this was. Emily misses you. We think it's best to establish some boundaries if you're planning to stay away long term." Boundaries. The irony didn't escape me. I replied, "Thank you for the message. I'm doing well. Tell Emily I'd love to see her when you're comfortable with that. In the meantime, please consider this my boundary. I will no longer tolerate being manipulated, erased, or financially used. I suggest you both review your solicitor's reply before taking further action regarding the house or accounts." They didn't reply, which was fine. Apparently, I was still listed as an emergency contact. She had a little fall on the playground, scraped her knee. We couldn't reach the parents, so she asked for you. The moment I arrived, she ran into my arms. "Gran, you came." I held her close, my throat thick. "Always," I whispered. "Whenever you call, my darling." She sat on my lap in the nurse's office, babbling about spelling tests and a class hamster. No trace of the politics of adults, just love. I didn't tell Daniel or Claire. I didn't need to. This wasn't about them anymore. Meanwhile, Judith and I began hosting weekly tea circles and formal chats with other older women who were, as Judith put it, being quietly dismissed by their own families. It started with 3 of us, then 7, now mostly overlooked, some financially controlled, some verbally worn down, and all of them still powerful under the surface. I saw myself in each one. We shared stories. We even invited a financial advisor from Judith's clinic to help women understand how to regain control of their pensions, estates, wills. We called ourselves the Silver Line because we were the thread holding things together, and because every storm cloud has one. Then something unexpected happened. A journalist from a local radio station asked if I'd be willing to record a short piece about late life independence and housing rights for elders. She'd heard of the group through a women's rights coordinator. I hesitated at first. I didn't want drama. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. But Judith said something that stopped me. "You don't owe the world your pain. But if you choose to share it, you give other women permission to stand up to." So I wrote something, and I read it. It aired on a Tuesday morning. By Friday, my inbox had over 80 emails. Women thanking me, telling me their own sons had taken over their savings, that their daughters-in-law had made them feel unwanted in the homes they helped build, that they'd never thought they were allowed to leave. One woman wrote, "You helped me realize I'm not just old, I'm still me." I'd forgotten, and I wept when I read that. Not for her, but because I had once forgotten to. Daniel showed up at my cottage a week later. He stood at the gate, holding a bag of groceries and a sheepish expression. I didn't let him in straight away. Instead, I opened the door just enough to lean on the frame. "I just wanted to check you were all right," he said. I tilted my head, "Or check if I've said anything legally damaging." "Ma'am, please." "No, I'm all right. I've never been more all right, actually." He hesitated. "Emily keeps asking when she can visit." "That's entirely up to you and Claire," I said. "My door's always open to her." He nodded. "We weren't fair to you. I see that now. I just didn't realize it was happening." "No," I said calmly. "You chose not to see it. But you've always had good eyesight, Daniel, so I don't believe it was an accident." He looked away, and I didn't comfort him because part of empowerment is letting people sit with the weight of their own choices. Later that night, I sat under the tiny lamp in my reading nook and wrote a letter, not to Daniel, to myself. "Dear Margaret, you made it out, not with anger, not with shouting, but with grace, clarity, and enough backbone to carry the weight of your own name again. This is your life now, no longer borrowed, no longer bargained for, just yours. And isn't that enough?" I folded the letter and placed it in my journal. Then I turned out the light and let the silence settle, not as loneliness, but as peace. There are 2 kinds of silence in a woman's life. The first is the silence of being ignored when you feel invisible in the home you helped build, left out of decisions and tiptoed around like furniture. The second is the silence. You choose, and that kind, the silence born of peace. Of no longer needing permission, that's the kind I now lived in. I filled my days with small, sacred things, fresh scones from the Sunday market, books stacked on the windowsill, a pair of wrens nesting under the gutter, Emily's little drawings, which I kept on the fridge. I wasn't just healing, I was blooming quietly, steadily. One morning, Judith rang me. Channel 4 wants to do a short feature on elder independence and housing rights. She laughed. Yes, you're articulate, you've lived it. And most importantly, you've acted. They want to show that it's possible, that there's life after the burden label. I hesitated. Judith, what if I say something wrong? What if they twist it into drama? Then you say the truth. That's all you owe anyone. I took a long breath. Then I said yes. The film crew arrived a week later. I half expected them to want tears, or to dig up some confrontation. But they were kind, gentle. They filmed me baking in my little kitchen, feeding the birds in the garden, reading letters from women around the country who'd written after my radio piece. They even asked to film our Silver Line Circle, the group of women who met weekly to share resources, build each other up, and tell the truth about what family silence really looks like. One of them, Annette, said to the camera, "People think old women don't matter, but I've survived cancer, raised 4 children, and buried 2 husbands. If I can't claim space now, when the hell can I?" That segment never aired. It went viral the day the piece aired. My inbox flooded. A national charity offered funding for Silver Line meetings across 5 counties. A women's legal initiative asked me to write a column on elder rights. I even got a letter from a member of parliament thanking me for amplifying a rarely heard voice. But one letter stood out most. It came in a plain envelope with no return. Addressed. Inside was a handwritten note in Daniel's looping script. "Ma'am, Claire and I watched your segment. Emily clapped when you came on. She said, 'Gran is famous now. You didn't just take care of yourself. You've inspired others too. I know we broke something. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know.'" Paper crown she made herself. "I told Daddy I wanted to stay with my queen Gran," she said. I laughed. "I'm a queen now." She nodded solemnly. "You stood up for yourself. That's what queens do." I held her close. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just healing from what had been done to me. I was becoming someone new entirely that weekend. We baked a cake together, not for anyone's birthday, just because we danced in the kitchen, flour on our cheeks, singing along to some old record. She fell asleep that night, curled up beside me on the sofa. And I thought, this is the family I've chosen. This love is mine, not because I stayed quiet, but because I finally spoke. The oddest thing about reclaiming your life is how ordinary it begins to feel. You spend so long dreaming of escape, imagining peace, fearing confrontation, until one day, it just becomes part of your daily rhythm. A mug of tea, a letter in the post, the quiet sound of self-respect, like rain against the windows, soft, constant, certain. And then one morning, you catch your reflection in the mirror and realize you're not surviving anymore. You're thriving. It was late June when I was asked to speak at a women's leadership summit in Bristol. The keynote speaker had dropped out last minute, and someone on the panel had read my latest article, The Invisible Backbone: What They Don't Teach You About Being a Mother in Old Age. The topic they offered me: boundaries, betrayal, and the rebirth of the self. I stared at the email, my hand hovering over the reply button. Old Margaret might have said no. She would have worried about stage fright, about who would watch, about whether Daniel would be embarrassed, but I wasn't her anymore. I took the train to Bristol, with my best blouse neatly ironed, a handwritten speech tucked into my purse, and Emily's paper crown carefully folded into my coat pocket. She had slipped it in with a note, "In case you forget how royal you are." That child, she saw me more clearly than most adults ever had. The conference hall buzzed with energy, women of all ages, all shapes, all stories. When I took the stage, my palms tingled. But as I looked out over the room, I didn't see strangers. I saw versions of myself, women who had given everything, who'd been written off, dismissed, told they were too much or not enough. So I began. For years, I believed love meant being quiet, that to be a good mother was to give without limit, to stay even when it hurt, to forgive even when they hadn't asked. But there comes a moment, quiet, sharp, when you realize that if you don't stand up for yourself, you'll disappear altogether. That moment is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. I spoke of dignity, of the joint account I never consented to drain, of the lies hidden behind just family texts, of the silence that isn't peace, but mostly I spoke of the aftermath of waking up in a small, imperfect cottage and finally feeling free. I ended with, I didn't raise my voice to be heard. I raised myself. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered most was the line of women who came up afterward. One held my hands and whispered, I've been too afraid to leave my daughter's house. You gave me the courage. Another said, I always thought starting over at 70 sounded foolish, but maybe it's not. I told them the truth. It's not foolish. It's freedom. The next day, I returned home to a small package on my doorstep. No sender listed. Inside, a framed photo of me and Emily from years ago, her small hands around my neck, both of us laughing. And a note in Daniel's handwriting. We've been following everything. She wants to see you every weekend. I want that too, if you'll have us. It was the first time he hadn't asked me for something. He was offering instead a connection, a bridge, earned, not expected that weekend. Emily came for her usual visit. She walked into the kitchen, set down her overnight bag, and placed something new on my bookshelf. A small drawing, 3 figures holding hands. She pointed, That's you. That's me, and that's Dad. I blinked. I said he had to be good if he wanted to be in the picture. She added matter-of-factly. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and whispered, You're the best judge I know. Later that night, Daniel came to pick her up. He stood at the door awkwardly, eyes on the floor. I'm not expecting anything, he said. Just thank you for letting her stay, for not shutting the door. I looked at him, truly looked. At him, he was no longer the boy I raised, nor the man who hurt me. He was someone else now, someone learning. Just keep showing up, I said quietly. That's all I ever wanted from any of you. He nodded, and for once, I didn't feel like the mother who'd given too much. I felt like the woman who'd given enough and had started giving to herself. That night, as the rain came gently, on the roof, I opened my journal and wrote, This is the life I didn't know I was allowed to have, where love is not a debt. And being seen doesn't require shrinking. I was never just a mother. I was always a woman first. And I'm finally living like it. You'd think after everything I'd want to shut the door completely. And for a time, I did. But the thing about healing is it softens you, without making you foolish again. It doesn't erase the memory of what people did. It just allows you to choose how much of your heart you're willing to hand back. And to whom Claire emailed. Me. Not a text. Not a call. An email. Margaret. I imagine you don't want to hear from me. And I accept that, but I just wanted to say. I watched your talk. I didn't recognize myself in the woman you described, and maybe that's the problem. I didn't see you at all. I'm sorry. Not just for the things I did, but for the things I let happen. If you'd ever like to have coffee in your terms, I'd be open to that. Claire, I sat with that email for 2 days. I didn't reply right away, not because I was angry, because I was free, and free women do things on their own time. When I finally wrote back, I kept it short. Thank you for the message. I appreciate the apology. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. Not out of resentment, but because peace is my priority now. Best. Margaret. Emily continued visiting on weekends. She became taller, sharper, asking bigger questions. Gran, do you think people always know when they're hurting someone? I paused. No, I said. But it's their job to find out, and to care enough to stop. She nodded like that made perfect sense. One weekend she brought a school assignment. Draw your family tree. She handed me her version, messy, colorful names written in crooked letters. She had listed everyone, her parents, both sets of grandparents, cousins, aunts, but she'd drawn a gold star beside my name. Why the star? I asked. She shrugged. You're the one who got her voice back. You should stand out. I laughed so hard I cried. It wasn't the validation I'd once craved. It was something purer. She saw me as someone whole, not as someone broken who stayed quiet to keep the peace. The Silver Line Circle grew rapidly. We met in church basements, libraries, even a yoga studio once. Our oldest member, Irene, was 89 and had just moved out of her son's house after discovering he'd been taking half her pension to pay off his gambling debts. I thought I'd die in that room, she told us. Turns out I just needed a key and some backbone. She now had both. At one of our meetings, I shared a phrase I'd written in my journal. Let them be uncomfortable with your boundaries. You lived for years being uncomfortable with their disregard. It made its way around the group like fire. Later that week, someone painted it on a mural at the women's center in town. I stood in front of it one afternoon, tears prickling my eyes. A woman who once folded laundry in silence while her family whispered about moving her out, now part of a wall, not faded into it. Written on it, Daniel began showing up. More regularly, not just as a father doing drop-off duty, but as a son trying to reconnect. He'd bring groceries sometimes, or flowers picked awkwardly from the garden, but he didn't push. "I don't expect to be in your life the same way," he said once. "I just want to be someone you can trust again." Trust. A word I had once given away to easily now. It came slow, earned, but he was earning it. Eventually, I agreed to meet Claire for coffee. We sat outside a quiet cafe. No tension, no pretense. She looked tired, different. "I didn't realize what I was doing," she said, "until I saw someone else name it, and I realized I'd been part of your erasure." I nodded. "Yes, you were." She looked away, tears brimming. "I don't expect anything from you," she said, "but I want to do better, even if you never forgive me." I stirred my tea.com. "I don't know if I will. Not fully, but I don't hate you." Her eyes widened. "I'd just learned to love myself more than I needed to be liked by you." That night, I walked home slowly. Sunlight filtered through the trees. A breeze lifted my scarf, and I realized I wasn't carrying any of it anymore. Not the weight of being ignored. Not the shame of being used. Not the grief of being reduced to a burden. I had laid it down and walked away with nothing but my name, my voice, and my truth. They say the past doesn't change, but we do. And that's the most powerful thing about healing. You don't erase what was done to you. You just stop carrying it like it was your fault. 1 year after I left Daniel and Claire's house, I stood at the front of a town hall auditorium, accepting a local civic award for community advocacy. The mayor called me a voice for those too long unheard. Me, Margaret Whitmore, the woman who once kept quiet to keep the peace, the woman they nearly moved out like old furniture, now standing at a podium, surrounded by women who'd found their strength after 60, 70, even 80. My speech wasn't long. I'd learned that power lives in simplicity. I gave 4 years without asking for anything, and when I finally did, I was told I was difficult. But here's what I know. Now you are allowed to ask. You are allowed to need. And when they stop listening, you are allowed to walk away. I didn't shout, I didn't break things. I just quietly took back what was mine, and that changed everything. The applause felt like a kind of justice. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. Certain like truth finally standing on 2 feet. After the event, Emily met me at the bottom of the steps, holding a bouquet far too big for her arms. "Gran, you were amazing. Can I give your speech at school?" I smiled. "You can give your own love. I think you're ready for that." She giggled. "Can I still quote you?" "Of course." Then she handed me a card. Inside, in her still learning handwriting, it said, "You're the reason I know how to be strong." I blinked back tears, not because I was sad, because for the first time in my life, I truly felt seen. That weekend, I invited Daniel and Claire for tea. They came, quiet, uncertain. I didn't host with fake smiles or perform politeness. I set the table, poured the tea, and sat across from them with the calm of a woman who no longer bends to be accepted. Claire cleared her throat. "Margaret, we just want you to know we're grateful for the second chance." Daniel added, "We're not perfect, but we're trying. Really trying." I nodded. "I don't need perfect," I said. "I just need honesty and respect, nothing more, nothing less." We talked. We didn't rehash the past. We didn't need to. Some things had been broken too long, but the boundary was no longer a wound. It was a structure, strong, kind, unshakable. That evening, as I washed the teacups and looked out at the garden Emily and I had started together, I smiled. It wasn't the cottage from years ago. It wasn't the house I helped them buy. It was something better. A home built on dignity, on choices, on voice, and finally on peace. I lit a candle in the kitchen, not out of habit, but as a quiet ceremony for the woman I had been, for the woman I had become. Then I opened my journal and wrote one final entry. Asterisk, they said I was a burden, but I was the backbone. They underestimated my silence, so I taught them to respect my voice. I didn't just leave. I reclaimed. I didn't just survive. I led. I didn't just take my life back. I rewrote the ending. Asterisk, and this time it belonged to me. The end.